I want to thank everybody for coming out to the Great American Outdoor Show, sponsored by the NRA, the National Rifle Association. We're really lucky to have the National Rifle Association on board. I don't know if you guys came out to the show 2 or 3, 4 years ago when it was the Eastern Sports and Outdoor Show. The NRA has really picked us up. The fishing aspect of the show is 10 times better than it used to be. In my opinion, the gun show is 50 times better than it used to be. I mean, there's everything and anything you could look for here at the show now as far as guns and fishing. And, you know, honestly, the show is going downhill, but it has come tremendously in the last 2 or 3 years. And we really have the NRA to thank for that. So, you know, if you guys aren't members of the NRA, become members of the NRA. They do a lot for the sport of hunting and keeping our Second Amendment rights and keeping us having guns. So make sure you support that kind of stuff. I want to introduce myself. My name's John Hansen. I am aspiring to fish the Elite Series, which is the top level of bass fishing that you can fish. Currently, right now, I fish what I would call the Bassmaster Opens, which is the pro level. It's one level down from the Elite Series. I also fish Federation, which I would consider that a semi-pro level. And last year I fished the Pennsylvania Bass Federation Nation, which qualified me for the Pennsylvania State team. And so this year I will be fishing for the state of Pennsylvania, which is kind of cool for me because I was born in Philadelphia. I lived in a row home in the city when I was a kid. And I've grew up in this area. I don't live in Pennsylvania anymore. I live on the Maryland state line right on the Chesapeake Bay, which is a phenomenal fishery. If you haven't fished it, you need to get out there and fish it. Also a great fishery is the Susquehanna River. So I'm lucky to be with the PA Federation this year, and hopefully, currently right now, I'm 2 tournaments away from the Bassmaster Classic, which is a Super Bowl of fishing. You can't fish any higher than that. I want to introduce Rod Bates. Rod Bates is down here on the end. It's Koinonia Guide Service. Rod's a friend of mine. He guides on the Susquehanna River. Support him. Go out fishing with him. Have a good time. They fish for catfish. They fish for smallmouth, largemouth. He's got a booth that is right over there. It's 2 rows over in row 2700, right on the corner. Go over there, take a look at his guide trips, see what he has to offer. If you guys live in the area and you don't have a boat but you want to get out on the river, he'll be more than happy to take you. It's him, a couple other guides that guide, and they'll take care of your every need. You go out, you have a fun time of fishing, you hang out on the back of the boat. He's the one who has to work like a dog while you just reel him in. So anyway, check him out. If any of you guys want any brochures or anything, he's going to come down and pass them out for you. So I'm going to talk to you today about lure presentation, how to catch bass, PMA, which some of you guys are saying, what's PMA? PMA is positive mental attitude, okay? That flows through your entire life. You can either choose to look at things in a bad way or choose to look at them in a good way. And it's all in your choice. You make a conscious decision in everything you do. If you choose to do nothing, you still chose. You chose to do nothing. So positive mental attitude can be the difference between winning and losing. I've lost tournaments because of positive mental attitude, having a bad attitude, and I've won tournaments because of having a great mental attitude. One of the tournaments that I just fished was on the Upper Chesapeake Bay. It was the state qualifying tournament for the Pennsylvania Federation. It was a tournament I should have had won. I had it locked up in the bag. I would have won it, which everybody says shoulda, coulda, woulda. We had 35-mile-an-hour winds, and they locked us into the Upper Bay, into the northeast, and they wouldn't let us out. Had I gotten to my fish, tournament would have been all mine. Now, the tournament director's floating around here somewhere. He probably have a different story to say, but I would have won. And positive mental attitude helped me in that tournament. I only got 6 bites that day. One was a 6-pounder I lost, and I caught my last 2 fish 10 minutes before we had to go in. I drove from the Elk River all the way up to the northeast. When I got to the northeast, my co-angler told me, he said, hey man, we got to weigh in, we're going to be late. I said, I don't care if we're going to be late. Right now I only have 3 fish in the box, and that's not going to win, and it really doesn't matter if I got 3 or 0. This is a 2-day event. It's not going to happen. I stopped myself, and I took a breath, and I looked at the fishing conditions. Everything is about fishing conditions. Everything matters. You don't catch fish by accident, period. If you catch a fish and somebody says that's lucky, it's not luck, okay? There is no such thing as luck in fishing. You were doing something right, and you need to pay attention to what you were doing and see if you can capitalize on that, okay? If you were jigging that rod and that fish bit it, and the whole day you were just dragging, well, guess what? It was that jig and stroking action that got that fish to bite, okay? So I looked at the whole area, and I saw the tide was coming in. And I said, okay, that's the worst time to be fishing on an incoming tide, but I had 10 minutes to go. I had to make the best of it. There was a point, and I looked at the point, and there was 20-mile-an-hour winds blowing on that point the same way the tide was going in. That's going to create a heck of a current, and there's going to be an eddy on that point. I said, I'm going to set up on that point. The water was starting to dirty up from the wind blowing against it. I tied on a black jig, a black mop jig, which is what I got here. I'm going to show you. I threw it out there, and this black mop jig's got rattles in it. I took my rod like this, and I just held it like this. And that's all I'm doing. I'm shaking it, and my lure's just barely moving in the water, and I'm just shaking it. And I can feel it coming down across this point. I knew there was a ledge on this point because I fished it before. My bait drops off the ledge. My co-angler's like, oh, we got to go in, we're going to be late. I said, quiet, we'll get there when we get there. So it comes off the ledge. I had nothing. Make 3 casts. Third cast, I set the hook, 4-pounder. Now I got 4 fish. Now we're in contention to do something. Now he's going, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. I said, we're not going anywhere. We don't have 5. I said, I'm close. I'm in good position. I knew I was in the top 10. We had 200 yards before we were at the check-in site to check back in for the tournament. I cast back out there. He's like, man, my catch isn't going to count for the day. You know, I'm going to be late. I'm going to get deducted a pound. Every minute you're late for a tournament, you get deducted a pound. I told him, I said, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to win. I want to win. Period, end of story. I throw out there, just as I say it doesn't matter, we're not going to win, he says, if you catch one more, you're going to be leading this thing. And right when he said that, I clicked my bail. I didn't even have my bail clicked yet. And I jacked him, and I said, well, I got him. Get the net. I landed it, 5-pounder. I weighed in 19 and change and was leading the event by 3.5 pounds, day 1. That's PMA. If I would have listened to him and I would have went in, I'd be nowhere. 3 tournaments, I could give you the same story how I won in the last 5 minutes. You have to have positive mental attitude. Forget what everybody else is telling you. Forget what's going on. Do what's in your gut. And my gut said I wasn't going to win if I went in. Got to cut the hooks off because these fish are going to be chewing all week, and we don't want to bust them up. You heard that down there. Grab that so nobody gets in it. Okay. I'm going to show you my flipping setup. I love flipping and pitching. Anytime I can be flipping and pitching a bait in the heavy cover, wood, 3/4 ounce jigs, that's what I like to do. This is called a mop jig. Very big, big profile jig, okay? I fish it on 20-pound fluorocarbon when I'm in open water, okay? Which means if I'm in a log and I know I can bring them away from the log quick, 20 pounds enough. If I'm in heavy, thick matted grass, I go to 65-pound braid. But whenever I can use fluorocarbon, I always do, okay? I use a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. This is a Shimano bait casting reel. Not sponsored by them, it's just what I like. It's what I was taught on, so it's what I use. This is a PAL 7.2 extra heavy rod. This rod's as stiff as a 2x4. It doesn't move. And the reason why you want it real stiff is because if I set the hook on this fish and I got him down in real thick grass, I want that fish moving. When you're fishing with 65-pound braid and heavy grass, I don't have to worry about whether my line's going to break. I bring the fish, all the grass wrapped around him, and I boat flip the whole thing right in the boat. He comes grass, clear the grass off later. Who cares about that? It's not a big deal. But what I want to show you guys today is lure presentation and how you can catch fish on big baits that you think the fish wouldn't get them in their mouth. Now in the tank here, the fish have been fed pretty well yesterday, I was told, so they're not biting real good. But I can't see what's going on because I got all the bubbles in here. But the fish will go down on that bait and they'll pick it up off the bottom. I do have a bait I know they'll eat if they're not going to eat this one. And I'm going to switch around to a bunch of different baits. But there's different ways to fish this jig. You can fish it in the middle of the water column and move it quick as it goes by. You can fish it on the bottom and just jig it. When I was fishing that tournament and it was dirty, muddy water, I was fishing just like this. That's all I was doing. Barely moving it along the bottom and letting those rattles rattle so the fish would get up on it. And that's all I was doing. And then fish will come over and they'll take a look at it and they'll bite it and take it on. Now, you have to read your fish. Some fish will go for a big bait some days. Other days they go for a little bait. Sometimes they just go for a regular sized bait. You have to change it up and give them a different presentation all the time, okay? Sometimes they like it stroked. Sometimes you take your jig, stroke it up off the bottom like that, and they'll hit it on the fall. They do it a lot in Erie. It's one of the big things that they love to do. What, bud? Think I can catch that one? Anyway, my son, he gets a little excited about fishing. So, presentation and how you present it. If you're fishing in Erie in 20 foot of water, you can do a Hail Mary cast and throw it 90 foot up in the air and not worry about your presentation because you're fishing 20 foot deep. It doesn't matter. But when you're fishing here, you know, this isn't deep at all. So what I'll do is I'll flip my bait and stop it right at the top of the water so it hardly makes a splash and it doesn't scare or spook the fish on the way down. Okay? I want to change this bait because I want you guys to see some fish doing some eating. And I got a couple different baits here I want to show you. I see him, bud. Think you can catch him? That's my tournament partner right there. Normally I bring 2 or 3 rods, rig them all so I don't have to change baits, but a little lazy today, I guess you could say. One big thing, if you guys don't use it, you'll want to use it, is super glue. A bait will last 5 times as long as if you super glue it on your hook, okay? All right, now you're probably looking at this bait and you're saying this is a gigantic bait and these fish won't eat it. Last year I was here at the show and before anybody showed up, I played in the tank. And I fished around in it and I brought big baits and I brought little baits and I said, you know what? This is a time where I got them grouped in tight and I can do whatever I want. Nobody's here watching me. I can throw whatever I want in the tank. So I did. I was amazed at the size of the baits that these little fish would suck in. And I learned that if they can get it in their mouth, if it will fit in their mouth, they can eat it. And a 12-inch bass can eat this 8-inch swim bait. And they'll probably eat this bait a little better because it's on the fall. The only problem is I can't see it because all the ripples on the water I can't see. So I don't know if they're eating it or not. But I want to show you a thing about scent. There, I can see that one. Now, that fish is interested. Okay? So if you're out there fishing in the water and you see that happen, that's telling you something. All right? Right now we just realized the jig is not working. Okay? Them fish weren't following the jig like they're following this big swim bait. Okay? So you got to say, okay, well, what was working? Is it color? Is it the slow fall? Is it a different presentation? You don't know what it is. Okay? But you got to keep trying different things until you figure out what it is. If they're following it, that means they were interested. Sometimes if you speed up, that'll get them to come get it. Sometimes if you slow down, that'll get them to come get it. Last year in the tank, I was playing around with scents, and I wasn't a big believer in scents either. And I'm going to scent this bait up as soon as I reel it in right here. I said scents. I said, man, maybe they work sometimes, maybe they don't work other times. You know, who knows? Is it a gimmick? Is it not a gimmick? And where do you get to see whether scents really work or really don't work? Well, I was at the show all day, and I was getting bored, and I was flipping my bait around on the floor. Well, eventually, they wouldn't eat the bait no more. They wouldn't even put it in their mouth. They put it in their mouth, they spit it right back out. I put scent on it. They went from grabbing it and spitting it to grabbing it and hoofing it all down their throat. It was amazing. So let's see if I put scent on it, if they'll smell it in the water and they might come and grab it. I use Mega Strike. And the only reason why I use Mega Strike is because that's what I had when I was here that day, and it worked. So I said, well, you can't go wrong. It's already proven itself. So Mega Strike comes in a tube just like this. I think I'm hung up. What's going on here? Does anybody know if any's chasing it? I can't tell. Gotta tell the guy who runs the tank not to feed him so much. See if sometimes we can get these ones right here to bite. Now, these fish here just don't want to eat, okay? You can tell that just by looking at them. But all fish are catchable. All fish are catchable, okay? If you throw the right bait at the right time, they will eat. Sometimes, if you let it sit at the bottom and you can see that they're all gathering around it, and you stroke the bait real quick, a lot of times that'll create a reaction strike, which they're not really feeding because they're hungry. They're feeding as if, you know, if I walked up to you and acted like I was going to hit you, a natural reaction for you is to block. And that's the same thing for fish. A natural reaction for them is to block. I'm going to switch out to a tube here in a second. We'll see if we can get them a couple to bite on a tube. Does anybody fish the PA Federation here? If you guys don't fish and you're interested in fishing and you want to fish, you can fish the PA Federation as a co-angler, okay? And you can join the PA Federation, you can fish as a co-angler, which means you'd fish off the back of a boat, somebody like me or one of the other guys in the Federation, and you'd fish the tournament as a co-angler. It's a good way to get involved if you don't have a boat and you want to fish. Every club out there in America is always looking for co-anglers. Man, I'm disappointed they won't eat it. I'm gonna switch up. I got some giant tubes. Is he on it? Another good thing to do with these big baits, like I'll do in tournaments, is you can fish with them on top and let them zing across the top of the water, and if you're in a grass bed or something, they'll come up and show themselves. And then if you know the fish are there, then you can work on catching them a different way. I'm going to try a tube bait, see if I can get them to eat this. Yes, sir. Now, you guys are going to laugh when you see the size of this tube, but when I go to Florida and I fish on the St. Johns, or I'm fishing in clear water for bed fishing, this is the bad boy to throw right here. They will eat this, and I promise you there's fish in here that will eat this bait and get the whole thing in their mouth. This bait's going to be hard to sink, though. If I had a Senko, I promise you these fish would be tearing these baits up. You see those fish are interested, but they're just not biting. Now let's see, I got some smaller baits. Let's see if we downsize to a smaller bait, if we can get them to chew. My hook might be too big for this bait. See what this does. I'm going to have a hard time flipping this bait. It don't weigh nothing. They on it. And these fish just aren't interested today. Now look at that one. He is looking at it. One thing you got to keep in mind is a strike zone. If you're not in that fish's strike zone, he ain't going to eat it. Sometimes the strike zone's 6 inches. Sometimes it's 2 feet. Sometimes it's 10 miles. They'll run and get a bait. Fish in Lake Erie will come 20 feet up to come get it in clear water. It's amazing what they'll do on Lake Erie. They're just too full. They ate too many goldfish last night. Hey, we got some Senkos. Let's give her a whirl. This is when you get the crowd to help out. Anybody ever fish with a Senko? If you're a bass fisherman and you don't have a Senko in your box, you're doing it all wrong. You're cheating. Senko, in my opinion, is like a go-to bait. This isn't even the right hook for it, but we're doing it anyway. Right, Rod? This is what you call finesse fishing with 20-pound fluorocarbon. Problem is they all wind up getting up on this end of the tank because you're fishing and you kind of drag them into this end of the tank. But there's something I want to show you. When I come down there. All right, you see that fish is looking at that bait? This is what you call dead sticking. And it is an effective technique. It does work, and it works really well on high pressured areas in the country where you fish. Deep Creek Lake, for one of them, is a very high pressured area. Dead sticking is off the hook in Deep Creek Lake. You can dead stick for a minute, minute and a half, and the fish will pick that bait up after a minute, minute and a half. I can't tell, are those fish nose down or are they just sitting there? Now, we talked about a reaction strike. That fish has kind of got comfortable sitting there, and if you twitch it, he might grab it. No, they're just not interested. All right, I'm going to come down because I want to show you some stuff in the tank that I can't see from where I'm standing. What's my time? Who's got the time? A little too close. All right, we got time. Okay. What you want to look at is your fish here in the tank. Okay, this is a lot of stuff that guys don't tend to show you. Look at how the fish are set up, okay? You have your smallmouth, you got some sunnies, bluegills. Man, it really gets bad down here. And then you got a school of fish up here, which I didn't even know were there because I couldn't even see them, okay? The fish will school up and group up, and you got to pay attention to that, okay? Man, it was really bad earlier. Maybe if I walk down to this end, it'll be better. It's crazy how it gets bad down here. So, right here, you have your trolling motor in the water. That's structure. Even though it's just a trolling motor, to these fish in their environment, that's a piece of structure. It's the same as a log. Don't count anything out in the water. I've caught fish off of grocery carts. I've caught fish off of picnic tables. I've caught fish off of anything in the water. Fish don't care what's in the water, okay? Bass are an ambush predator. They are going to hide behind something, wait for something to swim by, and they're going to come out and attack it. Kind of like when you were little and you played hide and seek, or you're trying to scare somebody. You know, you hid behind a wall when your buddy ran out, you jumped out and he jumped out of his skin. You laughed like crazy. Same thing here. That's what these fish are doing, okay? You notice you got some rocks right here, bigger chunk rock, and they're sitting on this. These fish here are relating to this structure. You notice you really don't have any fish right here in the middle except for that one. And no fish are sitting right here. They're avoiding these rocks except for the one that's really buried up in there, okay? He's really using that structure to hide out. He's not interested in nothing. He's just chilling. You don't see fish sitting right here. You have to pay attention to that kind of stuff because I see so many guys go down the bank and they just cast and cast and cast and cast and they're casting down the bank, okay? What, bud? Yeah, he's swimming around. He's hungry, probably. So people will just go down the bank and fish. Don't just go down the bank and fish. I don't, ever, okay? If I'm fishing in a tournament and I'm going down that bank and fish, I've already scanned that tournament with my structure scan or my depth finder, and I know what's under the water, and that's what I'm relating to. I'm either relating to a dip in the water where there might be a ditch. I'm relating to a hump where there might be a point. And I might be grinding a crankbait into that point. That might be what I'm doing. Or, like in the Chesapeake Bay tournament that I almost won, I was relating to wood. I was driving down the bank, literally driving down the bank in 2-3 foot of water, and the first wood I saw, I'd stop. I'd drive to the next one, stop and fish it, and that's all I did all day long. I fished wood I never fished before in my life. I fished banks I never fished before in my life. You know, I got my prop into the mud a couple times because I was riding down the bank literally 50 yards offshore. I never fished the areas. I didn't know how deep they were. I didn't know if it was a sandbank, and I didn't care. I was just looking for the next piece of wood to come up. So if you're fishing on high tide or low tide like tidal areas we have, it can be good to fish wood on a high tide, especially if you can see it. You can get up on it on the bank. On a low tide, it can be good as well because you can fish out off the end of it if there's enough left in the water. Sometimes when the tide drops out 2 or 3 feet, there ain't no wood left in the water and it's no good. So pay attention to what you're fishing. You can fish for smallmouth. Rod knows this. Big chunk rock can be great. These little fine pebbles, never catch fish. You take a crankbait, a 20-foot diver crankbait, and you're fishing 15 foot of water and it's just pounding the bottom. Bam, bam, bam the whole way. Next thing you know, you hit a big chunk rock, you feel the rod load up and you're like, wait, got a fish. Then the rod unloads because the crankbait comes across. Bam, big old smallie comes out and attacks it. That's what happens. He was relating to that big piece of chunk rock. Then you go looking for that big chunk rock. But sometimes you have it the other way around. Sometimes they're not in the chunk rock and they might be spawning in the pebbles, in the pea gravel, in the smaller rock. And that might be your deal. Also, you have to look at the subtle changes. Many times I've been fishing and you're fishing down a mud bank and the mud bank goes from mud, brown mud bank to red clay. You have it in North Carolina, okay? Lake Norman's full of it. Guess what? Where that mud line changes, that'll hold fish, okay? When you're fishing for smallies on the river and it rains, you'll have mud lines coming down a creek. The Susquehanna might have got no rain, but the creek just up the river there did get the rain because it rained on that side of the river, but it didn't rain on the Susquehanna. So the Susquehanna's clear as a bell, but there's a mud line coming in. Then fish will directly relate to the mud line, and bait fish will run down that mud line. That mud line can be the key of where to fish at, okay? And the bigger fish will sit right on the edge of it, wait for them little fish to come by and pick them off. So everything matters in fishing. Line size, rod and reel. That rod I was fishing with is a very heavy rod. It's good for pulling fish out of cover. If I went fishing with rod, I guarantee you he probably doesn't even have one tied on. He fishes smallies, open water, drop shotting, stick baits, stuff like that, where he ties on 8-pound line, 10-pound test line, because he's fishing in much clearer water and the fish can see it. And he sets the hook and he's got a 1/0 hook on there with a drop shot, and all he's got to do is reel up on it to set the hook. He doesn't even have to jerk the rod. And he's got nowhere for that fish to go. The fish came out of the rocks. He's not going back in the rocks because you just hooked him. He's ran out of space to go down. And you're in 20 foot of water. He's wide open. You can run him wherever you want him to go. So fish your conditions. If you can fish lighter line, it's always best to fish lighter line.
Dad,
What, bud?
do you mean that was me?
Yeah, you do that too. So if you fish, if you can fish lighter line, fish lighter line. What I encourage everybody to do is I see everybody go out and fish, and they fish, and as soon as they feel a bite, they set the hook. As soon as they feel a bite, they set the hook. If I could have done it today here, I would have showed you. I promise you, I can drag a fish from that end of the tank all the way to this end without ever setting the hook. The best way to learn that is if you can get in a grass bed and you can frog fish. Take your hooks on your frog, bend them down, twitch that frog across the top of the grass. When that fish comes up and crushes your frog, don't set the hook. It's hard because you see him and you're like, oh, wait, I'm not going to set the hook. And I'll do that when I'm practicing. And I didn't learn it until I started to practice for tournaments where you don't want to hook the fish, because when you hook the fish, that fish might not eat tomorrow because now he's got a sore mouth. So I remember the first time I'm twitching it across the top, twitch, twitch, reel, twitch, twitch, reel. Fish comes out and I'm like, almost set the hook. You know, you start preparing, it's natural. You're like, I'm ready to get that one. And he blows up on it and he swallows that frog. And if you just pull back on him a little bit and reel him slow, you can reel him halfway to the boat. You can see what size fish it is in the whole thing. And the reason why I tell you that is because I see so many people, as soon as they feel a bite, they set the hook. Well, guess what? The fish only had the back of your Cinco in his mouth, or the back of your worm, and he just took your worm and you ripped the worm right off the hook because he didn't even have it yet. You don't have to set the hook. When I set the hook on that 5-pounder with that jig, I had enough time to turn around and tell my guy, here he is, get the net. I didn't even set the hook yet. I reeled down on that fish until I felt it get tight, and I jack slammed it for all it was worth. Okay? I was in open water. I didn't have to worry about him getting tangled up in nothing. Another thing that people don't do is I see it all the time. You get around a big gnarly tree, guys who are beginners and who fish just weekend anglers, they fish the outside of the tree and they leave. Fish the outside of the tree. Oh, I don't want to lose my bait. I don't want to break off. Well, if you don't want to lose your bait, you don't want to break off, stop fishing now, okay? Just quit. I've caught 3, 4, and 5 fish out of the same tree fishing the middle of the tree. And the majority of the time, the fish will swim out of the tree on their own, okay? You don't have to harass them. You don't have to muscle them out of the tree. You keep tension on them, they'll swim themselves right around. If they wrap themselves around a pylon while you're fishing under a dock, you just hold tension on them 9 times out of 10. They'll swim themselves right back around that pylon. They'll swim themselves out of the tree. Don't get so anxious that you're pulling on that fish and it gets all crazy. Take your time, okay? It's fishing. Most of you are fun fishing anyway. You got the time. So what if he breaks off? Learn. Pay attention to why you caught the fish. Pay attention to what you're doing. And pay attention to your lure selection, okay? Sometimes it's as simple as changing a color. Sometimes it's as simple as changing a weight. I want to thank you guys for coming out to the NRA show today. I want to thank you guys for sitting here and listening to me run my gums for an hour. And if you guys are looking for me, it's HansenFishing.com. I don't update my website as much as I should. I update Facebook, so check me out on Facebook. John Harold Hansen III is how you find me on there. And I appreciate you guys coming out. If you guys want any autograph signatures, I got some autograph cards in my bag. I'll be happy to sign them for you guys or your kids or your hats. I also have 4 or 5 DVDs up here. They're for fishing the Upper Chesapeake Bay. When I did my DVD, I did it on the bay. So if you guys haven't fished the bay and want to, there's tips in there about how to fish tidal water. There's areas to fish up there in the Northeast. It's a good little instructional DVD, and it's the real deal. It's the way it was that day when we went out and fished. It's uncut. It's not, me jacking 100 fish in, a small farm pond. All right, guys, thanks for coming out.